first panel on this stage, Capture the Dream, the many lives of Captain C.P. Krishnan Nair. A story about a bon vivant with flamboyant linen suits, driving Rolls Royces, consorting with kings, and dining at the finest restaurants in the world. It is fated that we speak of grand hotels like the Leela in premises of a grand hotel such as this. We have author, columnist, keynote speaker, brand thinker, and practitioner from Bangalore, Harish Bijoor, who will have in conversation person who gave us Alex Smart and who we have to thank for Bangalore Times, sometimes adapter of plays, sometimes a Gyani aunt, sorry for the pun, other times columnist, journalist, best-selling author, literature festival curator, and somebody who will be much louder and heard over all the banging around us. She was the first Indian board member of the Paris-based World Editors Forum, a Jefferson Fellow from Hawaii's East-West Center, and the recipient of Mary Morgan Hewitt Award for Lifetime Achievement, Bachi Karkaria.
Let's go. Such a pleasure being here on this bright, sunny morning in Bengaluru, which is a very rare thing, as you and I know. So the Bangalore Literature Festival is certainly blessed. It turns 11. Hats off to Shiny, Ravi, and team, the entire team. If I look at Bangalore, I would typically say that, Bangalore has evolved over the years from being that sleepy pensioners' city, which morphed into different nomenclatures over a period of time. And Bachi out here had a role to play at a point of time. And so I was thrilled to hear that I was going to be sitting with Bachi today and chatting. And this was at a point of time when Bachi got into Bangalore. And she got into Bangalore at that point of time and decided that, Bangalore Times needed to make an appearance. And Bachi brought glitz, panache, color, lack of gravitas even, onto the situation of saying that there is something called a page 3 culture. So Bachi brought page 3 culture into the city. Now she'll deny and fight it out. But then, I think, things have morphed. I'm going to let Bachi have the say right on from now on. So till then, I'm going to tease Bachi. The second thing is that, Bengaluru has morphed. We are no longer Bangalore, but we are Bengaluru. And today we are a startup city. And so we moved from page 3 to the startup page. And to that extent, the startup page is the new page 3. Bachi has seen it all, and I think she's written this delightful book, put together on the life and times of a very colorful persona. I haven't even seen the book, touched it, because I've just gone through the PDF. I'm still old world, I'm very tactile, but then, this book, which is out here, is what we're going to be discussing. So Bachi, firstly, welcome to Bangalore.
Thank you.
Your take on Bangalore today.
Well, I must say that I do not believe all these stories about, oh, Bangalore, you can't move, look at the traffic. Anyone who comes from Mumbai, Bombay, has no business complaining about the traffic. And you're seeing some very beautiful buildings, not a lot of the rundown buildings that you see in Bombay. Because I now don't live in South Bombay. I live in Sivri, which someone says, why don't you call it Upper Worli, the way that Alex Smart changed Lower Parel to Upper Worli, thinking it was a fancier cachet. And I said, look, I don't even live in Lower Parel, I live in Lowest Parel. Because Sivri was really the absolute hub, the heart of the mill workers. So I don't buy this business about, oh, Bangalore has gone to the dogs. I think Bangalore is still a bitch.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, Bachi, Bangalore is that and much more if you really look at it. And I think, you are visiting the city at a point of time when Kannada swag is coming into play, all of a sudden.
Right.
We are so proud of our language, of Kannada swag. We have Rishabh Shetty and his Kantara. We have
And
a film which has recorded...
Flags.
Yeah, 1,250 crores, a film called KGF 2. from the first film which recorded about 1 crore was in 1965. So Kannada swag is here. So the city has changed, the city has plenty, and despite it all, we are here to
So,
have it.
Harish, I'd really like to, since you talked about Bangalore Times, I have to correct you that I don't think I just brought Bangalore Times. I think I changed the Times of India Bangalore. And it was to my advantage that Bangalore was changing from, as you said, pensioners' paradise to Silicon Plateau. And I had always written about cities. So if I had been any other kind of journalist, I may not have succeeded. But Bangalore was ripe to be talked of as a city. And we did change in 11 months. We tripled the circulation.
Wow.
And in a year and a half, we brought it from number 4, where it had stagnated for 10 years, to number 1. And I think it still holds that position. I don't know why I'm holding this big brief for Times of India, but I don't work for anymore. And anyway, so we did that by putting the bang into Bangalore. Really sort of, we talked about how it was changing. We brought local stories with a national perspective. Because, if a new flyover was being built, then yes, sitting in the Times of India, I knew about 5 flyovers in 5 different cities. So we knew, what had to change. And we also pointed out the fact that everything doesn't have to be torn down. Because if you remember, that was the time when all those lovely bungalows with the monkey grills were coming down, high-rise was going up, there was like total, chaos and traffic. I mean, that famous traffic had just begun. Yeah. So that's why it was, I think it was very challenging and very, very, very heartwarming for me to have done what I did in Bangalore, which is why Bangalore professionally has a very special place in my heart.
I'm so glad, Bachi. So glad. Bachi has put together this lovely book, and we're going to be talking about this, which is called Capture the Dream. And you're really talking about, a gentleman, Captain C.P. Krishnan Nair. Many of us know of him as the persona behind Brand Leela. And building together and putting together a business proposition, a hotel property which is all about luxury, is not an easy task. And Captain Nair, who I've met only thrice possibly, every time I met him in a room, he was the energy of the room, okay? And I used to wonder, where does this energy come from? After reading Bachi's book or skimming through it at this point of time, I think I know. And each one of you will know it as well once you go through this delightful book. Captain Nair would have been 101 today, maybe, if he was alive, if he were to be alive. He's not. I'm going to read to you the introduction of Bachi's book, which tells us exactly what we're going to be speaking about. So the introduction leads, those who live till the age of 92 often have a ringside seat as history unfolds. Some even manage a role in shaping some of the drama. But there are a few who dare divide their world into several stages and stride across each one of them with a performance to remember. Captain C.P. Krishnan Nair was one such serial player. Leftist and capitalist, freedom fighter, rationing overseer, soldier, promoter of humble handloom, and manufacturer of Scottish lace. Finally, most remarkably, the hotelier who redefined luxury. The child who could only get rice gruel for breakfast went on to dine with kings. This is his story. To an extent, the Nehruvian socialite by night and socialist by day was so true of Captain Nair. So over to the persona of Captain Nair, to hear it from you, what kind of a man was he, and what does this book make him to be?
Well, I have a confession to make. Just as you say you haven't touched my book, though hopefully have read it, I never touched Captain Nair, because I wrote this book after he had passed on, really just last year. And but what fascinated me was not about hotels, because I had written the biography of M.S. Oberoi, and that's a big hotel to match up to, right? But I saw an AV by Vijay Amritraj, and in that he mentioned the fact that Captain Nair was the person who had brought Bleeding Madras to the international stage. And it was that one little detail which really fired my imagination, because Bleeding Madras was the fabric of our youth. We all wore Bleeding Madras. And he was the man who had taken it to America. And then, of course, I realized that he was really this marathon man. And being the marathon man, I think you could sum him up in the slogans of two of the big, shoemakers. Just Do It of Nike and Impossible is Nothing of Adidas. And that really summed up, I think, Captain Nair. Because, you say a man 90 years staying the course. So yes, tenacity, passion. Everybody who's into business does need tenacity if you've been around that long. And passion, nothing can be done without that, even the smallest journalist. But I think what he and to that extent Rai Bahadur really brought to the table was this amazing audacity, this chutzpah. Nothing stood in their way. So if I could tell you, and this is what really fascinated me about the book, and which I hope will fascinate the readers of this book, are the stories of this man's audacity. For instance, it started from the time that he was just a low-caste Banya boy from this unknown hamlet in Kannur. His mother was a copra seller. He used to help his mother, husk the coconuts, go with her to the market to sell the coconut oil. But she managed to give him an education. She used her local, big man to put him into elementary school, then senior elementary school. And then she caught hold of this other guy and said, no, you must put my boy into secondary school. So this was the school of the Chirakkal Valia Raja. And the first year that this young little boy was there, the Chirakkal Valia Raja came for the school annual day. And here was this apparition, Raja, the way he was dressed, the way he spoke, and this, young boy. I mean, just think of him. He's this little boy from a village. He's never seen or heard anyone like that. But he's so bedazzled that instead of being dumbstruck, he finds himself propelled to the stage and recites, reels off this paean of praise, for the Raja. It's a very over-the-top paean of praise, but the Raja is very chuffed and says, okay, who is this bright boy? I will finance his education for as long as he wants to study. Not only his education, his books, even his clothes. So there he is, all set for that. Then by the time he goes to, by the time he's ready for college, he goes back to the Raja to get the next tranche of his money. By that time, the Raja has fallen on hard times. And so the Raja kind of looks despondent and Krishnan, Kochu Krishnan, as he's called at that time, says, oh my God, I'm in trouble. So then, but the Raja's word is the Raja's word. So the Raja pulls off the diamond ring from his little finger and says, take this to Bapalal, the jeweler in Madras, and he will buy it off you and finance your education. So that's how this guy kind of really got set up. Then, can I say some more stories?
Please,
Okay.
please.
So then, now his mother, he realized that he would be home. Then he went to the army because he didn't know what else he would go and, work as. So he signed up and he got a job as a wireless officer in Abbottabad, later made famous by Osama bin Laden. But that brought him into the ambit of people like Khan Abdur Ghaffar Khan. As a young student, he had been, quite a student leader. He had, with his self-confidence, he had caught the eye of A.K. Gopalan. So he sort of joined that union movement. He went with Gopalan to the Haripur Congress and, was then bedazzled by Netaji. And, all this happened. And then his mother said, now my poor boy, he's there. I'm sure he's homesick. So let me send him a jar of prawn pickle. But she managed to find a fairly impressive courier, which was the wife of VP Menon, because she was also Kanakamma. She was the second wife of VP Menon. And she was also from Kannur. So she took that prawn pickle, and that's how Krishnan Nair got into the ambit of VP Nair, who was his biggest door opener. And I'll tell you, one story about that door opening, that many years later, Leela, after whom all his enterprises are named, was his wife. And she was like a real dominating woman, proper, Malayali woman. And so she had said that One second. Yes. Yeah, so she saw lace. She went to London and saw lace. And she said, we must make lace. And anything that Leela, willed, Captain Nair had to find a way. So then VP Menon told him, look, for lace, you have to get the looms from the UK and Scotland. So he goes up to this manufacturer of looms and says, I want to buy your looms. So Mr. Mitchell, gives him this sort of very politely but very firmly says, why should I sell you my looms? I mean, they're a highly specialized, industry, and, what are you going to do with it? I mean, I don't think I can sell it to you, I don't know you. So he says, well, maybe may I, sir, borrow your telephone? And then maybe this other gentleman will be able to convince you of my bona fides. So he picks up the phone and he makes a call and hands the phone to Mr. Johnson and Mr. Mitchell. And guess who's at the other end of the line? Lord Louis Mountbatten. So because VP Menon has already introduced him to Lord Mountbatten when he was a viceroy here, so this poor Mr. Mitchell sort of falls off his chair and says, yes, of course I will sell you the looms. Even when about this bleeding Madras, so this big importer of textiles was coming to India, and by then Captain Nair had already become this exporter of handloom. And so then this gentleman called Bill Axelrod wants to buy his material. And he says, come and meet me, come and meet me in New York when you're there. And he says, well, where do you stay? He says, well, I stay at the Waldorf Astoria, and I have a suite on the 22nd floor. So Captain Nair promptly installs himself on the 29th floor of Waldorf Astoria, like a good Indian, tips all the bellboys and all the people so that he gets all the salutes. So Bill Axelrod is getting really impressed, and he tells Bill, why don't you come to my suite? And I'm on the 29th floor. And then, of course, he spends the first day saying, let's not talk about business. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about New York. Let's do all that. And then, of course, at the end of it, he gets this order for 1 million yards.
Wow. Audacity, that certainly is the word that we refer to when it comes to Captain Nair. If you really look at it, the luxury mindset in a boy from Kannur, a kind of an army background, and, army rations, moving from army rations to luxury is a huge mindset. And the muse was certainly Leela, I'm sure. Because if you look at Bleeding Madras, I think, that's a statement made, full stop. It became a generational thing. From an attitude which was typically in India in those days, bloody Madras. You know what I mean? From bloody Madras to a brand called Bleeding Madras, it really was something. So if you look at it, what is this in him that made him invest ahead of the curve? He was investing in, items much ahead of the curve, whether it would be brands, whether it was luxury, or whether it was cities. He invested in Goa as well at a point of time. What is this mindset of Captain Nair which made him that?
It really is. I mean, this is what fascinated me even about Oberoi. Like a man who comes from this totally unknown, place bound in what was now Pakistan. They've not seen an Englishman, in 10 years. They've seen the first bicycle in 5 years. And how do they make this leap of faith? And with Oberoi, this was the India of the begging bowl image. And he gives them a new definition of luxury. Captain Nair, another example of his audacity is that he enters hotels at age 65. It's a time when people are thinking of strolling into the sunset, not building hotels. And, they want to hang up their shoelaces, and he cobbles another empire, right? So, I just think it's a matter of vision and audacity. It really is that. And when you say about first mover advantage, in the sense, Bangalore, we talked of Bangalore to start with. See, Bangalore also was the sleepy, everyone would come, there would be sleepy Pune, there would be old world Hyderabad, there would be RSS fueled Nagpur. But it was really Bangalore which got the first mover advantage among these sleepy cities which were kissed by these, by the kiss of IT. So I think the fact that yes, he dared to come into Bangalore when there were already the aristocrats of the Oberoi and the Taj. He dared in Goa, you mentioned Goa. The Taj had already made North Goa the hub. But he said, no, I'll go to South Goa. In Bombay, Bombay was all South Bombay. But he took advantage of the new international airport. And he, of course, was a consummate player. I guess you need all that as well. So he had all the right politicians and maybe some of the wrong politicians. Because in Kerala, in Trivandrum, Achyutanandan was giving him a real run for his money. In Bombay, it was Antule, who, because I think he was under the pay of the other hotels, and he kind of refused to let this man's, hotel rise, above a certain level, even though he kept on talking about, land, the kind of the rules that governed land acquisition and things like that. But he just then managed to, elbow his way past this political thing by also having the right political people. And I think it has to be a question of, yes, they are very egotistic and they think that they are wonderful, but they are not above understanding their limitations and knowing how to bring in the best of the world. So if you look at all his hotels, or even if you look at the Oberoi, they bring in the best talent from the world, whether it's a question of building the hotel, whether it's a question of, furnishing it, whether for Captain Nair, I think where he really stands out is his softscapes, the greening. No other hotelier or industrialist has been the kind of man with not just a green thumb, I think a whole green body. Because you look at his beautiful grounds, no hotel has that. And even like, for instance, like Four Seasons, he had already built a very successful hotel in Bombay. His Goa property was doing beautifully. He had got 75 acres. But he realized that to get into the $500 a night Bali kind of tourists, I need to bring in a bigger chain. So he brought in Four Seasons. So he brought in Four Seasons as to how to run a world-class hotel. But when Four Seasons got too big for its boots, and also I think trampled on his toes, he showed them the door and he said, sorry, I don't want you. Sure. Even though he went into 100 crore, expense, which is why Bangalore Hotel got stuck, after its first wind, because he had debt. Debt was really the four-letter word, which was his nemesis. And it really, ultimately led to the sale of the hotels.
Wonderful. There are the ups and the downs. There's some beautiful, I love your writing. I love the kind of phrases you use. We've heard some of it right away today. But there was a line which said, it was easy to see why Captain Nair took to Bombay like a prawn to Malabar curry. Okay, now that I emoted with, because I am all about prawns, Malabar curry, and Captain Nair, of course, the area we come from. But let me ask you one last question. Every business has its ups and downs. The Leela has had its downs. And the Leela today is a Leela as a property in someone else's hands, except for one property which is at Mumbai. Ups and downs, how did he cope?
Well, he didn't cope, he just went ahead. When he got into this whole big debt over here, when people told him, tone down Bangalore, he instead added some more flaws. So he was, he really typified Browning's line which said, a man's reach must exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? But I think ultimately what did him in was again, because I've got the chapter here which says, till death do us part. And it was really this combination of, again, Shakespeare's line of vaulting ambition which overleaps itself. That was his problem. And Yeats's line of things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy, rules the world. So he then became the victim of both internal issues, his own ambition, and external forces. It started with Lehman Brothers. And, the hospitality industry, is the first one to catch a cold when the world sneezes, right? And so Lehman Brothers kind of brought about such a huge domino effect in the markets throughout the world. So the hospitality industry got hit. Then 26/11 happened. So once again, people couldn't come over here. He was at the top of his game. You know, his shares commanded the highest price in the hotel industry 8 years earlier, and only 8 years later, you know, he was forced to sell because he just wasn't servicing his debt fast enough. But he thought, I'll brazen it through. He had issued these foreign currency convertible bonds, you know, which would have sold. His market was soaring. But then all this happened. So those investors got spooked and then they wanted to sell rather than convert to equity. And he had to borrow from banks who had then all raised their interest. So it became into this terrible spiral.
Sure.
But, you know, but I think at the end of the day, I think his inheritors, they really snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, because by the time the economic downturn had started and the pandemic finally killed whatever was left of it, these people had already sold to Brookfield. And as I wrote over here, that even if they didn't go laughing to the bank, they certainly went smiling into the sunset.
Wonderful, 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 totally. Comment, Karkaria? I mean, that's what you're called, I'm told. If you really look at it, we have enjoyed this book, and in true keeping with the tradition of the Bangalore Literature Festival, we're going to close on time. And I would just like to say thank you for this book, and thank you for this contribution. And, you know, hope to have you in Bangalore more and more and more. Thank you, Bachi. To Bachi.